Good morning, all sammen. Good morning, everyone. And congratulations on being up so early. Although I'm more impressed about Eileen because she's actually up at 3, her time. So yeah, consider that when she comes on stage. We're going to talk about a very extraordinary TV show in the next 40 minutes. It's not very often that HBO catches the interest of a manuscript written by a 23-year-old. That happened in this case. I don't think it's ever happened in TV history that a girl in her 20s writes, produces, directs, and acts in a show that becomes a worldwide hit, and Lena Dunham has done that. For the first season, she went on to be nominated and won 2 Golden Globes, which is also fairly well done, one could say, and went on to have a worldwide audience and rave reviews around the globe. Blir nesten andpusten av å snakke om det, ikke? Ja. So obviously that's due to Lena Dunham's unquestionable talent, but it's also due to the fact that she has some grown-ups on board. And Eileen is one of them, a person who has brought in all her skills, all her experience, and all her expertise to make the show happen and to make the show a success. And I've just met Eileen, and I think it's funny, I have to say this. Don't get paranoid, Eileen. She has some similarities to 2 other women in comedy in Norway, namely Elina Kranz and Kristina Resk. I think it's like a producer DNA going on. Yeah, sort of a high energy, high authority. You can see this woman, and you can see that she gets things done. So, and now she's up at 3 a.m., and she's here in Norway, and she's left the crew who are taping for season 4 to be here. Give her the huge welcome that she deserves. Come here.
That side.
Norwegian TV people, fans and followers, Eileen. Welcome to Norway, Eileen.
Thank you, thank you.
So you have left the whole circus of the production of Girls to be here with us.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what kind of problems have you solved within the last, 12, 24 hours in order to be able to be here? Because executive producer could mean a lot of things. So what kind of stuff is on your, agenda?
Well, I'm sort of the sheep herder. In television, there's a lot of different producers. Most of the producers are actually writers. I'm the non-writing producer. I affectionately call myself the sheep herder.
Yeah. Which means that you call all the people you work with sheep?
Sheep, yes.
Nice.
They're sheep.
Yeah.
But it's a very affectionate term. And since I've been here, through, good old internet, texting, all that kind of stuff, they're trying to keep me up to date. My production manager, co-producer, and my assistant, they're writing these sort of glowing emails about how well things are going. And I'm starting to wonder, well, either I can stay on vacation for a while, or they're just not telling me all the bad stuff that's happening. So I'm not quite sure. But a couple of emails I've gotten just in the last, 12 hours or so, we're potentially losing a location because it's an office location that actually is in a law firm, and guess what? Sometimes you can't really work out the contract well because there are lawyers on the other side. And so on my end, I'm saying, well, there's 2 actors in those particular scenes who were day players, so I was basically emailing my casting director saying, if you haven't hired them for those dates, hold off for the moment, because if we have to change locations, then we'll shoot it on a different day, and so we'd hire the actors on a different day. Kind of boring stuff, but it's just sort of a coordinating thing. And then just before I stepped on stage, I got an email that said, well, we might be able to work it out in that location. And
you had an eye makeup issue because Lena went to the huge party at the Met, and she had too much eye makeup on, so they spent an hour getting it off her?
Yeah, and when I got here when I landed in London on Tuesday, and the first thing I said, well, how are we doing on set? Because the big Met ball, the big costume ball was the night before, and sort of every celebrity fashion person is there, and it's a big night out, and Lena and Allison, who plays Marnie, were there, and they said Lena was a little bit late, but nothing terrible. It was actually pretty good considering, but she had never taken her makeup off from the night before, and in our show, she's very unglamorous. Yes, we use hair and makeup, but we don't really do a lot of it, and sometimes it's to make her look worse, not better, and she came with all this glam makeup on, so they had to spend quite a few minutes taking it off before they could sort of get her back to looking like Hannah as opposed to very glamorous Lena.
And you have 3 mobile phones with you, so there's a lot of stuff happening, even while we're sitting here.
Yeah. Two that work in Norway.
Okay. Listen, we have to get back to your story, because before Girls, before Sopranos, you had way back, you had a totally different plan. You're not trained to do television. You were supposed to be a doctor.
I was supposed to be a doctor. I don't know. The quick story is I got into medical school, and I was doing research at a hospital, and I wrote a letter to medical school saying, can I defer for a year? And they wrote me back saying I could. And then I figured, oh no, now I have a year to figure out how to get a job in the movie business. It was all about the movie business. And it's every cliche. I started off like watching parking spaces and getting coffee. I mean, it's kind of, said, how'd you get into the movie business? It's really, that mind numbing that I was, my parents were like, wait a second, we sent you to college and graduate school and you're watching parking spaces? So.
But it gives you authority when you're talking to other people on the crew. You said, I started in this business making the coffee and watching the partying spaces. Now go work.
I know I can sympathize with the guys who are now watching the parking spaces and all the people getting coffee and doing craft service and sort of working your way up. And a lot of the people who work with me have done all the same things.
What was your first movie that you worked on?
There's a very tiny movie was the first one, but the second one I worked on was Crocodile Dundee. And I found them on the street. I was walking out of a nice department store on Fifth Avenue, and I saw them doing running shots, the driving shots of him in the Crocodile Dundee in a limo driving around. So most of the crew was standing on the sidewalk, and I started talking to them, and I asked somebody for a job. Basically, I said I'd work for free, and they hired me, and I worked for free for 2 days, and then, the girl basically doing the coffee and the beer, broke her arm, and so then I think I became the beer and cigarettes PA, pretty much.
Which is pretty low down. The cocaine PAs are a bit higher, aren't they?
Yeah, the cocaine PAs. Yeah. This was the 80s, so yeah.
So basically, you left the medical school project and you entered the world of movies and TV series.
Yeah.
Worked your way up in studio movies and various TV series, and then big moment in your life was when David Chase got in touch with you in '97, talking about this series that he wanted to do about this guy in New Jersey.
Yeah, it was actually not even David Chase who called me. It was some random guy who was temping at HBO who called me up and said, hey, are you available? And usually in my position, they don't really care if you've read the script or not. It's really just, are you available? And I had just finished a job as sort of a studio executive, which brought me further away from the actual process of making the shows. And I sort of quit that job and said, I'm going to go on vacation. And so when this guy called me up and said, are you available? I kind of went, and then I just went, send me the script. I mean, it was like a 14-year-old just going, send me the script. And I can't remember what I did 3 days ago, but I do remember they actually did FedEx me the script. And I remember ripping open the envelope, and I even remember how I was laying on my bed, which was like diagonally across the bed. And I read the script, and it was amazing. And I called them back, and I thought, maybe I won't go on vacation. Maybe I'll do this. And I called them back and said, this is really good. And then I didn't hear from them for a day or two. And then they said, well, can you come to LA for an interview? And I went, because I had just come back from LA. And I said, send me a plane ticket. And they did. And then I met with David Chase. Actually, it was kind of, I drove, I knew LA a little bit, but I drove to HBO and I changed my clothes in the car, and I went upstairs to this interview and nobody was there. There was an assistant, and the assistant said, they've moved it. It's this other location. And when I drove over there to the other place in Beverly Hills and I walked in, and it was kind of like a Sopranos episode. It was like a low-lit room, and there was David and a bunch of other people. And I talked to them for a while, and I really sort of convinced him that I knew New Jersey because it all took place in New Jersey. He was from New Jersey. They wanted to shoot in New Jersey, and I had an old boyfriend from New Jersey, so I knew sort of about New Jersey, and I said all the right things. And then the next day, he called me up saying he wanted me to do the show. Cut to a couple months later when we were location scouting, and we're driving around New Jersey, and he looked at me, he goes, you have no fucking idea where you are, do you? And that was true.
But the two of you became an entity and,
yes.
and planned and worked out the first pilot, and then eventually you worked with him all the way through the
All
series.
the way through. I actually made it from the pilot, which was in 1997, even though the show went on the air in 1999, and then all the way through 2007. So 10 years. So when we started, I was really young, and he used to say, "Oh, you know, you're a sweet young thing," and now I'm like, "Don't finish that sentence now."
But tell me, getting into a project like Sopranos and then eventually Girls, is it a job, or is it like a life? Is it a passion that demands everything you have, or do you have time, to sort of cultivate orchids or have dogs or see old friends? How much of your life do you invest in these projects?
There's quite a bit. I mean, when I signed on to Sopranos, you're really just signing on for a 3-month job. I mean, it's a pilot. It's going to be 3 months, and then it's over, and then you don't know what's going to happen. You don't realize you're signing on for 10 years. And truthfully, like I just saw this morning on my BlackBerry that they just picked up like Law and Order Special Victims Unit for season 16. I mean, if you ever said to me, "Oh, you're going to be on a TV series for 10 years," I would say, that's crazy. I mean, I actually was a production assistant on the pilot episode of Law and Order way back when, and the thought of being on something for that many years. On Sopranos, there were breaks, even though it was over the course of 10 years, but we only really did 6.5 seasons. So there were breaks in between where you sort of got to kind of go back to your real life a little bit. And it didn't feel like, "Oh, I'm signing on for 10 years. It just sort of happened that it kind of kept going.
Yeah. But you don't have office hours when you're in the middle of production. You're
No,
not like,
you don't have
after
office
5,
hours.
you
No.
get my voicemail.
No, it's sort of like, call me when the season's over. And so, and as much as you want to have all these friends in all these different businesses, you realize that after a while, most of your friends are in the TV or movie business because they're the only ones who put up with the crazy hours. Or you can call them up at the last minute and go, "Hey, let's go to the movies." Or you can cancel at the last minute too, if something comes up.
Yeah. So you generally want to, sort of hang around your own tribe because
Yeah.
we understand each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sad but true, yes.
During those years in Sopranos, did you ever appear on screen? Did you sort of?
I did. I did.
You did?
Did you watch it? Did you know that? Are you just asking me, or you know that
Well,
I did?
I'm manipulating you here.
You're manipulating. Yes, I played the doctor in an episode, and I had no aspirations of being an actor, but we were sitting there in casting, and it would always be the casting director, the assistant casting director, David, myself, one of the writers, or a couple of the writers. It was kind of a tough casting room because it was a crappy little office with bright lights, and half of us sort of falling asleep sometimes. And we brought in a lot of people for this role, and nobody was really right. And so David just got bored, I think, and didn't want to bring in any more actors, and just said, "You go try it." So I went out and I looked at the lines, and we did that. There's several people from the crew who are in the Sopranos show because, hey, let's get this guy or let's get that guy. So I think he was just tired of casting that day, and I became the doctor. In Girls, it's a little different. In Girls, Lena and Jenny, the showrunners, put the crew in a lot, and I try and kind of keep them from doing that sometimes because it's nice to actually hire real actors and not take the jobs away and give them to the crew.
So that's you keeping the
Yeah,
order of
but
things.
there are a lot of sort of famous faces in there.
Yeah. So we're jumping, many years at the time here because you finished a Sopranos, and at that point in your career, you could choose from the top shelf. You could possibly, decide whatever you wanted to do because you had such a great name, and you were offered Boardwalk Empire, which is...
Well, I wasn't offered Boardwalk Empire,
they said
my agents and people, "Hey, there's this next show coming up. It's sort of the natural thing to go do."
Yeah.
But
Martin Scorsese was going to do the pilot.
Yeah.
$18 million budget or something.
I'm not going to comment on budgets.
Okay.
I'll stay out of trouble. It's one of the Terry Winter, who's one of the really great writers from Sopranos, was writing that, and internally they're like, "Don't you want to do this?" And the truth is, there are a lot of producers involved in that, and I really liked my experience on The Sopranos, which is when we started out, it was just myself and David Chase, and I also didn't want to step back in right away to something quite that big. I actually, had a little time sort of off there, and really what I stepped into next that was for HBO. I did a pilot for them, a David Milch pilot that didn't go, but really what I stepped back into was, well, maybe I want to go back to film. Maybe I want to go back to movies. And so what I ended up doing was a mini-series version of Mildred Pierce because to me it was going to be much more like the Sopranos experience, which is that when I started Sopranos, there was Brad Gray, who, his company developed the show with David, but on the ground actually making the show, when we did the pilot, it was myself and David, and, we found the production designer and the director of photography. And so for Mildred Pierce, it was Todd Haynes, who's a filmmaker, and his producer, Christine Vachon, and he's done a lot of, great independent films. And to me, I thought, well, if I want to get back to the movies and out of television, even though this is television, to work with a film director, and Kate Winslet was the star, so to work with, a A-plus list, movie star, this is the way to get back into movies. And
so you did that, Mildred
so I
Pierce.
did that, yeah.
And then the next thing that you moved on to was Girls, which then is a story written by this 23-year-old who had made a movie in her parents' apartment with a $40,000 budget. Those budgets we can talk about because they're so tiny. And she was a bit of a sensation that year when the movie came out, Tiny Furniture, and she got a lot of attention in the indie sort of movie field. Do you remember in the same way reading the manuscript of Girls in the same way that you remember the Sopranos script, that something special jumps off the page right away?
There's something special. I mean, when I met up with Lena and read the script of Girls, her movie had been at South by Southwest, which is a big film festival in Austin, Texas. It hadn't been released in theaters yet. And so, sort of there was this buzz around her. I didn't know who she was. HBO called me up to ask me if I could suggest someone to produce the pilot. And I said to them, well, what if it's good? What if I want to do it? And they said, no, you're too big budget, you can't do it. And I said, well, send it to me, I want to read it. And so they sent it to me and I read it, and it's the complete opposite of The Sopranos in terms of the material, but in terms of the feeling I got when I read the script, which was that it was a unique voice. I mean, when I read David's script was a super accomplished, finely tuned script of Sopranos, but you just had a sense who these people were and what the potential of the show was. And when I read Lena's script, I had read a whole bunch of other stuff from HBO and from other places, and I read a lot of very well-written scripts, but nothing that really jumped off the page like, hey, you know what, this could be something really interesting. And so I spoke to, I met with Lena, and I watched Tiny Furniture. I said, well, send me her movie. So I watched it on DVD, and there was a consistency. This show sort of jumps off from where her movie sort of started. I mean, it's not the same character, but there's similarities. I mean, she's in the lead role in both. But it just thought like, well, this isn't, when you do a movie, you just have to have like one good script. When you do a television show, you have to do it every week. And I felt like, well, there's some consistency between her movie and this pilot episode.
So you sense that this was going to be your new project. But you had to actually fight for it. Because a lot of people who make decisions concerning these things thought that this is not right for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, at HBO, it was a little selfish on their part, is that they wanted to save me and a couple of my friends who sort of do what I do, save us for kind of like the big stuff. And I didn't really want the big stuff. As you're sort of moving up and up and up, you always want to do bigger and better and more expensive. And I was sort of tired out. I didn't really want to be doing bigger and better, more expensive. I wanted to be doing smaller and controllable and maybe only shoot 4 or 5 months a year, not 10 months a year, and sort of have my sanity a little bit, and at the same time do something that seemed like a quality show, and something where I could have some sort of creative impact and that another really good collaboration. That's what I was really looking for.
But is there an element of you as a woman seeing that this story was something totally new in terms of comedy about women and girls? That made you, even more interested in doing it?
No, what really made me more interested in doing it was just characters, that she had really sort of sharply drawn characters. It could have been boy, as far as I was concerned. It was just really that she had a unique voice and a sort of confident voice. I mean, it's kind of an added bonus that it was a confident voice, about women, but about a generation, and part of it also was that I was interested in, like everything was shifting when I got into went sort of from films into doing television, it's because I saw the world shifting a bit where everything was becoming either tiny, tiny movies or huge $150 million movies where you're blowing a lot of stuff up. And where I went to television in my career was that because I was going towards what used to be sort of the $20 to $60 million movies, was where you really found the good character pieces, and that was existing less and less. And in television, there was that's where all of a sudden there was, things like Sopranos and Oz and, some of these other, cable shows where, you could tell stories and there was, really good character development. And so you were attracting better writers and better actors. And even though Girls is comedy, I still saw that, it's a character-driven show.
Yeah. So you're one of the grown-ups. Jenny Connor is another one. And then there's Judd Apatow, who's also... what can we say? He's an executive producer, but did he come sort of as a guarantee for HBO that because Judd Apatow had his stamp of approval on Lena and on the script and on the whole idea, it was easier for them to go with it?
Yeah, it certainly fast tracks it. The setup of the show was that Lena went to HBO. They set her up sort of on a creative date with Jenny Connor, who's a writer who had written some other shows, had worked with Judd before. Jenny walked around, to her credit, with a lot of DVDs of tiny furniture, gave one to Judd. Judd watched it and loved it. And so then Judd emailed Lena and said, hey, if you need help or if you want me to kind of ruin your show, But really Judd signing on and Judd really having confidence in Lena, I think gave HBO confidence in getting the series going much more quickly. Once again, because you can write one good movie script, but in television you have to do it every week. And so with sort of Judd behind it and Jenny, I think that they just had the confidence of she's not going to be a one-hit wonder, that this can really keep going and have a life.
But did you sense the scale of the huge impact that the Girls has had? Did you at what point did you sort of realize, no, this is going to hit hard, this is going to be big?
It's kind of like Sopranos. So you never really know what's going to be a hit. When you have fun making a show, you think, oh, this is never going to go anywhere because you had fun doing it. So you figure, well, it's the ones that you're miserable on. Those are the ones that get picked up and go. So anytime you have fun doing a show, you think, oh, this is too good to be true. This isn't ever really going to go anywhere. And it happened with Sopranos. I mean, all of a sudden, we finished the show and it went on the air. It was like, oh, wow, people really like this. We can keep doing this. And it was sort of the same thing with Girls, and you never think it's really going to happen twice. I mean, you think I was lucky with Sopranos. That's never going to happen again. And, Girls is on a much smaller scale, and the world has changed. And one of the reasons I was starting to say before that I was interested in it is that because media is changing, I was interested in something, on Sopranos, it was in the States, it was Sunday nights at 9, and everybody would drop what they were doing and watch the show Sunday nights at 9. And by the last season, I even found myself not watching Sunday nights at 9, but maybe Sunday nights at 9:20, because I had set the DVR and could watch it 20 minutes later, or Sunday nights at 11. And that was 2007, and so now so much of the world has changed in the way people watch TV. And I realized, 23-year-olds were not even watching TV. They were watching everything on their iPhone, on their computer. TV was almost sort of a foreign concept. They were consuming a huge amount of media. I mean, Lena consumes, I don't even know how she has enough hours in the day to consume the amount of media she consumes, whether it's, little, video, 3-minute videos or full shows, old movies, whatever. It's all on a computer. So I was really interested in Girls for the subject material and for the to be able to collaborate with them and work really closely with them, as opposed to something like Boardwalk Empire, where there's a huge production. Something like Girls, it was, Jenny, Lena, myself, Judd, in Los Angeles, more dealing with script with Jenny and Lena, but really on a, ground-up level of building this show, and also the cross-platform, that people were maybe not going to be watching this on TV, but they were going to be watching it on their computer, on iPhone, and, something that didn't exist when we were doing Sopranos is that while people are watching Girls, I think a fifth of our audience is live tweeting about it at the same time. And it was really exciting for me to be involved with something that had, that sort of crossover.
So you have a small production, fairly, compared to other things that you've done, and you're close to the action all the time. But what is it like to work with a person who's 23 when you started, and
she's almost 28 now.
Yeah, and she's used to doing everything herself, which she had done on her previous projects, and then all of a sudden you're putting her into a system with a writing room and lots of different people who are in charge of all the different things. What is that like for her and for you?
For her and for me, I mean, for me it's for me and sort of some of the people came on my team. You want to try and sort of instill some good habits. And I mean, you know, making movies, and TV shows, it's a little bit like the military. I mean, it's not a little fly-by-night production. It's for HBO, so it's all union, and we have to, you know, build real sets. It's, you know, on terms of scale, Girls is smaller than most of what I've done, but it's bigger than most of what's considered like small TV shows. I mean, we do have sort of a wealth of riches, and part of that's because, you know, HBO has been very generous with us. So we have a lot of freedom. But, you know, I have to give Lena a lot of credit, is that she made a movie in her parents' apartment for $40,000 with probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 12 people, you know, and then the first day she walks onto a set to shoot the pilot, and there's, probably 75 people standing around. And she was amazingly confident, and you would never know that it was her first time. The best story is from the pilot. When we shot the first scene was one, and I don't know how many people have seen the pilot, but it's when she starts off, she's in the bathroom, she's in the bathtub with Marnie. Marnie's shaving her legs.
And she's eating a cupcake. It's a legendary scene.
Legendary. So she's
something healed inside me when I saw that scene, actually. Yeah. Something that I didn't know was broken. There's this normal woman in a normal bathtub eating a cupcake whilst having a bath, which we all do. I mean, obviously. Anyway, go on. So you take that.
We started there, and I said, well, I'm sure you want to shoot that scene last. You're naked, you know, in our schedule. And she says, no, I'll start with that. That's fine. Okay. So we start with that, and it's going smoothly. And to get the set quiet, because we're on a sound stage, they customarily ring. They say 3 bells, and they ring 3 bells. And she had never been on a sound stage before, and she never, you know, she was very calm, cool, and collected. But she heard, and we would never know that she was nervous. But she heard the 3 bells, and it really wasn't about, you know, being naked that she was nervous. She was nervous. She was directing this big production for the first time, and when she heard the bells, she thought, oh, good, it's a fire alarm. We can all leave the building, and we don't have to. So, you know, she's told that story a lot of times, and it basically just shows, you know, the complete lack of experience, but amazing amount of confidence, you know, that she had in doing all of this. And really, to her credit, I mean, you know, I sort of feel like myself and some of my team, kind of like school teachers, you want to lead them in the right direction and sort of really encourage the good habits and get rid of some of the bad habits. And some of them, they're like no habits because there's no experience. So you have to show what the good habits are and try and get rid of, like, you know, some of the not so good ones, and just say, no, this is, lead them in the right direction.
And you said to me that earlier when we talked, that she doesn't realize the power she has, you know, the power of her pen.
Yeah.
That's if she puts stuff in the manuscript, it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my job, and sort of saying, you know, what do I do as like sheep herder? A lot of it really breaks down to communication and just the way I like to run a set and prepare a show and work with the other creatives, whether it's the production designer, the location manager, the director of photography, that, you know, you have these little meetings where everybody's hearing the information at the same time. It doesn't.
I love those meetings.
Yeah.
That's the only kind of meetings one should have, actually.
Yes, yeah. But the thing is that she had started out really working with her director of photography, she did Tiny Furniture with, who was our first season. So she would run off and go sort of talk to him, and we would all try to trail along behind. And they thought we were spying on them. It's like, no. If you want the stuff to happen, we have to know about it because we have to sort of put it in the works. So right now, she always thinks like, I'll call a meeting and kind of get everybody there. And you know, I get a little bit authoritative of like, just it's about getting everybody on the same page and all listening to the same thing, so then everybody can go off and do their jobs. And she'll always say to me, am I in trouble? And it's like, no, you're not in trouble. I just want everybody to hear it at once. So going back to your example, you know, sometimes she was, you know, rewriting or just doing little notes on a script, and there was a party scene, and we're sort of asking how it was different from a party scene we had done the week before. And she said, well, it's a different kind of party. One was sort of a, you know, freshman, first year of college kind of party. a keg party with, red cups and, a kid party. And this one was a graduate student party. So in the script, she wrote in there that, it's very theatrical, and that there's people in nightgowns, and there's people drinking blue liquid from beakers, and this is all in the script. So I called this meeting to talk about what that set was going to look like, because before you start spending money on costumes and set dressing and all of that, the crew just goes to the script, reads it, and says, great, everybody's going to be in nightgowns. Everybody's going to be drinking out of beakers and blue liquid. So I called this meeting, and she was like, am I in trouble? It's like, no, I just want to talk about what this party scene is going to look like. And it's actually what they're shooting today while I'm not there. So I'm not actually sure. But so the costume designer said, well, so, how many people do you want do you want everybody in nightgowns? And I said, nightgowns? Why? I just wrote that, and she realized, I said, well, it's in the script. So she would have, if we didn't do the meeting, she would have shown up and been like, why is everybody in nightgowns? But she wrote it as sort of a description, like, meaning in her head that, like, some people were in nightgowns. And then we said, well, blue liquid and beakers. She goes, no, we could just have regular glassware. Where'd that come from? And it's like, well, I'm sure, late at night she was dreaming it up and pictured this in her head where there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but the crew doesn't know, and the crew just goes straight to the script and assumes. So
your role as a sheep herder, you actually have to know what she thinks rather than looking at what she writes, because there might be a discrepancy there.
And I really sort of learned that from Sopranos, too.
Yeah.
It was very much like, you don't want to stop the creative process, but you do sort of want to define it a little bit before everybody shows up on set. You don't want to go too far one way, too far the other. And I really, would ask a lot of questions on Sopranos. And it's the same thing here. And it's really just about giving the crew wants to do a really good job, and the crew wants to be prepared. And really, I think the biggest lesson I'm always trying to impart, on girls, to Lena and to the writers is that, when she finishes writing the script, it's in her head. She feels like she's prepared. She knows what she wants to do. But it's really going back to your thing about working with 8 people versus working with, 175 to 100, 125. It's really about the communication, about what's in your head, what you want to see on screen, but all these other people have to work to get there, and it's about getting people on the same page. Yeah. And, going back to... there's a man named John Patterson who's passed away, but he was one of our best Sopranos directors, an old friend of David Chase's and one of the best directors. And he used to say this thing, it's a selfish business, and would say, John, what do you mean by it's a selfish business? And what that means is that each department is really focused on their thing. So the set decoration department can put down the most beautiful rug on the floor, but then they decide to do a dolly shot, and then the dolly grip will pick up the rug that you're not going to see now because the dolly has to move smoothly on the floor, so now the rug is out of the way. And then let's say they want to light a certain way, so the beautiful chair that the set decorator and the designer put there might get sort of shoved over because the light is going there. And so everybody's sort of doing their thing, and my job is really to sort of make sure that everybody's, that just kind of coordinate this selfish business
and that
thing.
No one sort of wants to kill each other.
Yeah.
Basically making sure that the inmates are not running the asylum. I think it's a fair way to say it.
Yeah. I mean, we exactly. We just did a scene, and just pointing to girls, we did a scene, and on the technical scout, which is where you go with, Lena was directing the episode, so you go with Lena and then the heads of all the departments, and she said, it's a crowded bar. And we're like, how crowded? Because, of course, in my mind, I'm responsible for the budget, so it's like, are there 20 extras or are there 100 extras? She goes, really, really crowded, like you can't move in the bar. Okay, let's empty the bar out a little bit so we can get the equipment in. So we hire a lot of extras, and then we're shooting it, and there's a scene you see a lot of extras, but then I see a scene between 2 people at the bar, and they're just sitting there, and I'm looking at the frame that they've set up, and I realize in a crowded bar you have somebody kind of pushing your shoulder on either side, and there looks like an empty bar. And so I looked at the frame, and I jumped onto set and said, Lena, where's the crowded bar? Well, the director of photography had moved one person over a little bit because blocking the light, and somebody else. And I said, no, let's get some shorter people and stick them in there, and let's put our crowded bar back together. But it's sort of little stuff like that I would never know if I hadn't been on the tech scout and hired all these extras, that it's a crowded bar.
Listen, we have to talk a little bit about HBO, because, being probably one of the strongest culturally defining forces in the world right now in popular culture, and it has changed TV completely. It is in the forefront of the development, and it's totally committed to quality in the way that makes us as viewers very happy. But I'm wondering, to work for HBO like you do as a freelancer, is it a very special place on earth? Is it, you know, do you sense that it's a place run by some seriously, you know, advanced thinkers and some special people?
I'm going to say yes, because they've been employing me for 17 years. But I think that there's a lot of factors. Yes, I mean, they're completely committed to quality. They're completely committed to just doing good stuff. I think part of what I was thinking about this the other day, and I think part of it is that I know when we started Sopranos, one of the reasons why David Chase, and they really weren't in that business. I mean, they'd done the pilot of Sex and the City, the pilot of Sopranos. They really hadn't done much. They had Oz, and, you know, at that time, the head of the company was the head of programming was Chris Albrecht, who's now at Starz. But, you know, when David came in, and he had been to every studio, and they kept saying, well, yeah, it takes place in New Jersey, but you're going to shoot it in California. Or it takes place in New Jersey, but you're going to shoot it in Toronto. But when he walked into Chris Albrecht said, well, it takes place in New Jersey. I assume you're going to shoot it in New Jersey. So it started really there. And one of the reasons David was interested in HBO, because there had been a show that he liked that had been there called Larry Sanders, which, you know, which was Gary Shandling, and it was a half-hour show, and it was completely different than Sopranos, but it was kind of a groundbreaking in its own right. And then once Sopranos was on, all these other creative types would call up David and say, hey, is it a good place to work? And, well, the answer is yes, we're getting to do what we want to do. On my end of it, yes, it's nice. I mean, on the one side, on network television, you're usually doing 22 or 24 episodes a year. I like the schedule of doing 13 on Sopranos, or on this we do 10 or 12. You know, that's nice. But really what it is, it's the creative freedom that when you're doing a show for them, Girls as an example, or Sopranos, every show doesn't have to fit into just like a little cookie cutter slot. You know, you have the freedom to go off and do some kind of crazy episode in the middle where it just has two characters, like the one we were talking about.
Yeah. The doctor episode, as we call it.
The doctor episode, yes, where it's just Lena's character, Hannah, and the doctor that she meets when she throws the coffee shop's trash in his garbage. And so the freedom, like on a network, you'd very rarely be able to just go, oh, we're going to go do this one episode and not see any of the other characters.
So there's more freedom. And
once
you have the green light, you have green light all the way through, which is also a good...
Yeah. I mean, we actually finished shooting the season, you know, before it's on the air. On network, you're usually, you know, doing a show, and then 30 or 40 days later, it's on the air. We kind of finish the whole thing, then edit, then it goes on the air. Yeah. So you have time to kind of fix things.
Yeah. So it's like a humanistic
yeah,
organization, basically. Listen, we're running out of time, Eileen. I wish we had a full hour or four. But just a few last things. We have big breaking news, actually. There's a Norwegian in season 4. Isn't that true, though?
There is a Norwegian in season 4. He came to visit. Is that Norwegian here somewhere?
Is Ned in here?
Yeah, there he is, right there.
Get on your feet! He's in the cast! So Nedin works in the Norwegian Film Institute, and he came on the set, and you succeeded in putting him in.
He came for the Tribeca Film Festival, and he came to visit set, and we were doing a scene in a restaurant, and they turned around towards the bar, and I said, okay, Nedin, you're in, and he's standing right behind the two main characters who are having a very important conversation. So I can't always promise that somebody's in the final cut, but that's a pretty important conversation. So I'm pretty sure Nedin's making it in.
We're glad to hear that. Okay, so the final question. Obviously, Eileen, would you consider working in Norway based on your
Sure. I mean, Stevie Van Zant's doing pretty well there in Lillehammer. I'm pretty impressed.
I can already now see a few people who I think are in the, you know, who will easily invite you to come here.
Sure.
We only work 8 hours shifts.
If you only work 8 hours a day, I can get a whole lot of people to come. A whole lot of people to come. Most of the American film industry will come here now. 8 hours a day.
That's interesting. I'm working it. Okay, good. Eileen, it's been great talking to you. And I think we'll just finish this session by a short clip that's another scene that sort of healed something inside me. Because I think it was like a small scene, but a big step for mankind when Lena plays ping pong.
Okay.
And that scene speaks to me in so many different ways, on so many different levels. I don't have any words for it. Just enjoy this, and thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.